All right, moving on to 42. So the directions for 42 says evaluate each equation below. Remember that if we're evaluating, it means that we are given a value for our variable. So in this case, it's x. So we're given 4 for our x, and that means that we are going to take that 4 and we are going to plug it in any place we see that variable. So we're going to plug it right in there for that x. So we would get something like 2 plus 3 times 4. And whenever you evaluate, I want you to plug it in parentheses. This will help you if there's issues like with negatives and stuff like that. So I plugged it in inside the parentheses. Now remember order of operations. We're going to do multiplication first and then the addition. So 3 times 4 is 12. So 2 plus 12. 2 plus 12 is 14. So that means that f of 4, so if our input is 4, then our output is 14. Easy peasy. Let's move on. So it says evaluate for a equals 4 minus 5c when c equals negative 1/2. What is the value of a? So in this case, it's not a function. All we're doing is just plugging in this and for this value, and we're trying to figure out what the value of a is. So it would look something like 4 minus 5 times a negative 1/2. There's a couple different ways that we could do this. We could change this into a decimal, or we could change it into a mixed fraction. I have a feeling that you guys would probably like a decimal more, so let's do that. And since we also have a negative here and a negative here, right, a negative and a negative, when we multiply them, they give us a positive. So make sure that you keep that in mind. So what that means is that we have 4 plus 5 times 1/2, and that's basically saying what is half of 5? Well, half of 5 is 2.5, so it's going to be 4 plus 2.5. And if we do 4 plus 2.5, we end up with a equals 6.5. And we're done. On to part C. So part C, we want to figure out what n is equal to, and we know that n is equal to 3 times d squared minus 1 when d equals negative 5. What is that value of n? So here's a really good example, you guys, of why you want to use parentheses when you're plugging something in. So if we write this out, we would get n equals 3 parentheses negative 5 squared minus 1. Remember, order of operations tells us to do this exponent first. So exponent to the power of 2 means negative 5 times negative 5. And so a negative times a negative gives us a positive 25. So if we continue, we end up with n equals 3 times 25 minus 1. If you guys want to do this on your calculator, totally fine, but also think about it like 25 is a quarter, and if I have 3 quarters, right, 3 quarters is 75 cents. So in this case, 3 times 25 is 75. So n equals 75, and then remember this minus 1, we got to keep bringing it down. So n equals 75 minus 1, so n equals 74. Boom, done with that one. Awesome. Moving on to part D. So now we've got the function notation back. So h of x equals negative 4 times the quantity x minus 2. What is the value of h of negative 1? So again, see how there's an x here? In place of that x is that negative 1. So we're going to put this negative 1 right there. So we end up with negative 4 times negative 1 minus 2. And we have to clear the parentheses before we can do this multiplication out here. So negative 4 times negative 1 minus 2 more, right? So it's going to be a bigger negative number. So negative 1 minus 2 would be negative 3. And then if you look here, we've got a negative and a negative. So when we multiply those guys, we're going to get a positive. So negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12. And so when h is -1, so when we have an input of -1, our output is positive 12. All right, last one. So for 3 plus k equals t, when t equals 14, what is the value of k? So again, take this 14, plug it right in there for t. And so we end up with something like 3 plus k equals 14. Now this one's a little bit different, right? Because our variable has something on the same side. So imagine this is like the unit tiles. If I wanted to take these unit tiles and move them over here, I'd have to do the same thing to both sides. So I'm going to subtract these 3 unit tiles from this side. That means I have to subtract these 3 unit tiles from that side. So we get k equals 14 minus 3 would give us 11. So k equals 11. And we are done with 42.